When my daughter Emily died in my arms at 38, the grief was almost more than I could bear. But it was at her funeral that the real heartbreak began. That's when the man who'd abandoned her 10 years prior came strutting in, all dressed in black, demanding the $29 million Emily had left to me. Hey, I'm David Miller, 68 years old, and let me tell you, the last 4 months have been nothing short of tragic, watching cancer slowly steal away Emily, my only child. Ever since her mom passed when she was just 12, it was just the two of us. I put my everything into raising her, doing my best to give her a quality education, and when she grew up to run successful fashion stores in Chicago and New York, my heart nearly burst with pride. On March 15, 2024, Emily called me into her hospital room. Her fiery spirit had dimmed, replaced by a serene acceptance. "Dad," she said, her voice soft but unwavering, "there's something you need to know." She handed me a sealed envelope that would change everything I thought I knew about her life. When I got home that night, I opened it to discover she had amassed a $29 million fortune through her businesses. Her will, drafted with Michael Clark, our reliable family lawyer, named me as her sole heir. "Dad, you've been both my father and mother. No one deserves this more," she had written in a heartfelt letter. Emily took her last breath on March 22, 2024, at 6:47 in the morning, with me right by her side, whispering that I loved her as her soul slipped away. The days that followed were a foggy mess of sorrow and funeral arrangements. Come March 25th at St. Francis's Grand Church, it was standing room only, with all the friends, family, and colleagues who came to pay their respects. I was sitting in the first row, overcome with grief, when a tap on my shoulder pulled me back to reality. There he was, a tall man in a sharp black suit. "I'm Daniel Peterson," he said, his voice catching. "My deepest sympathies for losing our Emily." My mind raced. "Our Emily," he had the nerve to say. This was the man who vanished 10 years ago, leaving my daughter to pick up the pieces. He was briefly married to her from 2012 to 2014. As soon as she got pregnant in early 2014, he disappeared, leaving her with debt and a pregnancy that ended in a stressed miscarriage. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm in that sacred place. "I'm here to say goodbye to the woman I loved," he said, dabbing his eyes in what I could only call theatrical tears. "Emily and I had our differences, but she always had a spot in my heart." His display made my blood boil, especially as mourners mistook him for a grieving former lover. He positioned himself right behind me, drawing sympathy with his overly dramatic sobs. At the final goodbye, he approached the casket, placing his hand on it and murmuring something I couldn't hear. After the service, we moved on to Oak Ridge Cemetery. Daniel lingered, sticking unnervingly close to the family, maintaining an odd, almost calculated presence. It wasn't the raw grief of a man mourning, it was a performance. When the casket was lowered, Daniel again approached me. "David, there's something we need to discuss later about Emily and the future," he said, and those words hit me hard. What future was he talking about after ditching my daughter when she needed him most? I realized then that Daniel's presence at the funeral was about more than just saying goodbye. His intentions seemed unlikely to honor Emily, nor were they going to give me the peace I so needed in that painful time. After the burial, as everyone headed over to my sister Linda's for the reception, Daniel lingered by his shiny black Mercedes, a look on his face. Okay, so picture this. He's ditched that whole somber act he had going on at the funeral. Now, he's sporting this sneaky little smirk that just makes your skin crawl. "David, we need to have a real talk," he started, all casual-like, as he lit up a cigarette. "Emily's still my wife legally, which means I have a right to her stuff," he claimed. I was just standing there, flabbergasted at his nerve. After vanishing for a solid decade, this guy decides to show up and lay claim to what my daughter had worked so hard to earn. Daniel, you cut ties with my daughter in August 2014. You have no stake in any of this, I shot back, trying to stay calm despite the anger simmering inside me. That's where you're wrong, he replied, still grinning like a fox. I did my homework, and turns out Emily skipped some minor legal stuff in our divorce papers. So technically, we were still married in certain eyes of the law. My legal team says I can chase at least half of that $29 million she stacked up. I was stunned. This guy had clearly been planning this for a while, just waiting for the chance to swoop in and claim his supposed share. Who do you think you are? I couldn't hold back anymore. You walked out on my daughter when she needed you the most, left her broke and pregnant, and now you waltz in talking about rights? Daniel tossed his cigarette aside, giving me this ice-cold stare. Look, David, I know you're hurting, but emotions don't change the law. Sure, Emily built that business, but I helped her get off the ground when we were together. I've got proof. What a crock. I knew the truth. Emily opened her first store in 2016, after we secured a loan together, way after she and Daniel had split. He never invested a cent in her dreams. Listen, he continued, trying to sound intimidating. We can resolve this quietly if you hand over my share, let's say $15 million, and skip the whole court drama that'll tarnish Emily's image across the media. Right then, the true Daniel shone through, a man willing to wreck my late daughter's legacy for cash. Are you trying to extort me? I stepped closer, challenging him. No, just suggesting a peaceful settlement. But if you prefer the media narrative of the father of Emily Miller, the famed entrepreneur, denying her widow what he's due, he let those words hang in the air. Suddenly, I was back to that January night in 2014 when Daniel bolted on Emily. She called me crying at 11 p.m. saying all she found was a pathetic note on the kitchen table. I'm done. This isn't working out. Don't contact me. And that was it. No goodbye, nothing. Then, in a cruel twist, she learned he'd drained their joint account of 12 grand meant for her dreams, leaving behind a mountain of debts he'd racked up. The final crushing blow came in March 2014, when Emily lost the baby. She tried reaching out only to discover he'd changed his number and cut her off everywhere. She had to grieve both her child and marriage, totally alone. You know something, Daniel? I spoke, keeping an eerie calm. You're right. This will get sorted one way or another, but hear me out. If you dare drag my daughter's name through the mud again, you'll regret it. Daniel let out a laugh, mocking me. What? You trying to scare me, old man? I'm 42, and you're close to 70. Plus, I've got connections you can't even imagine. Think it over. $15 million now, or $20 million later after dragging it through courts and wiping out what's left of your good name. Get lost before I do something I might regret, I snapped. Think it over, he called out as he climbed into his flashy Mercedes. You'll get the documents on Monday. I stood there watching him drive away, my blood boiling at his nerve. Watch closely, 'cause this story's not over, I thought, filled with an anger yet renewed resolve I hadn't felt in years. What gall he had, trying to exploit a grieving parent who'd just lost his child. He sure picked the wrong father to mess with. Emily taught me to stand firm for justice, and that's just what I intended to do. That night, sitting in my living room, surrounded by countless photos of Emily from when she was a little girl to her final days, I came to a decision. There wasn't a chance I was going to let Daniel get a single cent. I was determined to do everything in my power to reveal his true motives in court. The morning after I had that run-in with Daniel, I started my own investigation. I couldn't just sit around and wait for him to throw any legal threats my way. If he was going to be all sneaky about this, then I needed to find out what else he might be hiding. My first move was going to Michael Clark, the lawyer who had helped set up Emily's will. Michael, experienced and in his mid-50s with over 20 years dealing with inheritance law, welcomed me into his office on Michigan Avenue that morning. "I'm truly sorry for your loss, David," he said while flipping through Emily's papers. "But you can breathe easy knowing your daughter's will is airtight. She was very specific about her wishes and fully aware of what she wanted when we drafted this. Michael, I need you to dig into this Daniel Peterson guy. He's claiming he's entitled to Emily's inheritance, but I'm sure he's all talk," I said, recounting the awkward encounter at the cemetery. Michael took notes as I explained. "I'll check the divorce papers. I distinctly remember Emily ensuring all ties were legally severed." As Michael got to work on the legal angles, I figured it was my turn to reach out to Patricia Johnson, who had been Emily's personal assistant for the last 5 years. Patricia had the scoop on all of Emily's dealings and relationships more than anyone else. We met up later that afternoon at a cozy coffee shop not far from Emily's offices. Patricia, always the reliable and reserved 34-year-old, seemed jittery that day. "Mr. Miller, there's something you need to know about Daniel," she said, glancing around nervously, as if worried someone might be eavesdropping. "For the past 3 months, he's been making moves to get close to Emily." "What do you mean, get close?" I asked, instantly on edge. "Starting last December, he'd call the office, asking for Emily. He used fake names, but I could recognize his voice from what Emily had shared with me ages ago. She instructed me to hang up on him if he ever called again." What Patricia told me next was enough to make my skin crawl. In January, Daniel had even shown up at the office when Emily wasn't there because of her chemotherapy treatments. Still, he went straight to Patricia, persistently probing. He was nosy about the business, wanted to know the number of stores, and if Emily had partners or investors. And what did you tell him? I didn't tell him squat. But he kept pressing, even waved a $500 bill in my face just to confirm what the papers were saying about her success. I kicked him out, but I found out later he was asking the same questions at the bank, where Emily had her main accounts. This confirmed the gut feeling I had. Daniel hadn't shown up at the funeral out of any love for Emily. He was scheming, trying to uncover my daughter's financial details as she was fighting against cancer. "Patricia, can you prove any of this?" "Yes, Mr. Miller. After that first call from Daniel, Emily had me start recording all our calls at the office. I've got them saved on my personal computer." This was just what I needed to hear. If he had let anything slip, those recordings would be our gold mine of evidence against him. The next day, Patricia handed me a USB with the recordings. As I listened to them at home, it was hard to believe the audacity of Daniel's words. In a conversation from February 15th, he straight up told Patricia, "Look, Patricia, I know Emily's not well. Just tell me if it's worth trying to mend fences. I'm not looking to waste my time if she's got nothing for me." And then on March 8th, he was brutally honest. "I heard Emily's sitting on a pretty hefty sum. If that's correct, maybe we can sort out our old issues. Everyone deserves a second chance, especially when there's a fortune in play." But what really floored me was a recording from March 20th, just a few days before Emily sadly passed away. So Daniel gives me a call, and he's not being subtle at all, asking if Emily left a will. He's fishing to know if he might automatically inherit her assets through some legal technicality since they're technically still married. When it hit me, it was like a ton of bricks. Daniel's plan was laid bare. He'd been keeping a close eye on Emily's health, waiting for his moment to swoop in as the grieving husband to claim her wealth. His scheme was as devious as it was smart. That same night, Andrew Moore, who's an old work buddy with connections in the financial world, dropped another critical tidbit my way. Andrew confirmed that Daniel was in deep financial trouble. "David," he said, "I've done some digging on Daniel Peterson, and the guy's broke. He lost his consulting business last year from some bad calls on cryptocurrency. Plus, he's got massive gambling debts, over $80,000 at various casinos around Chicago. The loan sharks are breathing down his neck, and my sources say he's desperately trying to scrape up money. It all clicked into place. Daniel wasn't just an opportunist. He was a man under pressure, seeing Emily's death as his ticket out of this financial disaster. This was why he had the audacity to start making legal threats. Armed with this knowledge, I got on the phone with Michael to set up a crucial meeting. We needed a solid legal game plan before Daniel sprang his trap. That Friday evening, while I was knee-deep in sorting out documents and recordings, a call with an unfamiliar number came in. As soon as I picked up, I recognized Daniel's voice. "David, are you ready to take my offer? Because come Monday, I'm filing the court documents, and it'll hurt your wallet more. Last chance. 15 million, and we walk away happy." "Daniel," I replied directly, "I think you need to reconsider your position. I've learned some very enlightening things about your real intentions." There was a long silence before he responded. "I don't know what you're hinting at, but let me warn you, don't cross me. I've got connections and resources that could make your life hell." "Let's see who gets the upper hand," I shot back and hung up. That night, for the first time since Emily died, I slept peacefully. I knew the legal fight ahead would be rough, but I finally had the ammunition to protect my daughter's memory and unmask this opportunist. On Monday, April 1st, 2024, as promised, Daniel followed through. At 9 a.m., a courier showed up at my door with an official package from the Chicago Civil Court. Inside was a hefty 47-page lawsuit where Daniel not only claimed the $29 million, but also sought damages, accusing us of hiding marital assets. His legal argument was convoluted, yet seemed well-crafted. He alleged that during their marriage from 2012 to 2014, they began a business partnership that was never officially wrapped up. He also claimed that Emily built her business empire using ideas and contacts he had provided. The most shocking part was the list of witnesses he claimed would support his story, names I'd never heard before. People supposedly able to attest to his involvement in Emily's early business days. It was clear he'd been orchestrating this scam for a while. Wasting no time, I called Michael to arrange an urgent sit-down. Later that day, I arrived at his office and found him immersed in the lawsuit's nitty-gritty. "David, I'm not going to sugarcoat it," Michael began. "Daniel's brought in Christopher Vaughn, one of Chicago's top inheritance lawyers. This guy is notorious for winning tough cases through loopholes and media manipulation." "What's this mean for us?" I asked, feeling anxiety sink in. "It means they'll be playing dirty. Vaughn has a history of leaking things to the press to ramp up public pressure against us." Michael was right on the money. The next morning, there it was, the Chicago Chronicle splashing a loud headline across its front page. "The $1 million fight over Emily Miller's inheritance. Justice or family greed." The piece totally played favorites with Daniel, twisting the story completely. It made him out to be some hotshot businessman who put his own goals aside for his wife's ambitions, only to be unfairly left out of the rewards from their marriage. They even included a picture of him dressed in black at the funeral, with a caption like, "A husband's battle for justice." That week, while Michael was busy working on our legal comeback, I rolled up my sleeves to dig up the real dirt on Daniel. Patricia mentioned that Emily kept all her crucial documents in a safe in her private office, and she had left me the combination for emergencies. Jackpot. Inside, Emily had kept every little bit of correspondence from her divorce, emails from Daniel back in 2014 when he walked out. In one email from February 15, 2014, Daniel flat out said, "Emily, I'm done. Not cut out for being a dad, and your business dreams are just dreams. I'm off to New York for a fresh start. Don't try to track me down." Then there was another email from March 3, 2014, even more straightforward. I took out the money from the joint account because I need to settle in. Think of it as my payment for 2 wasted years in the marriage. Handle the apartment debts yourself. The real prize was a handwritten letter from Emily to her lawyer in August 2014, right amid the divorce. It spelled out all the sneaky and underhanded moves Daniel made. She wrote, Daniel Peterson walked out on January 28, 2014, when he found out I was pregnant. He cleaned out $12,000 from our joint account, my savings. After I lost the baby in March from stress, he blocked every attempt I made to reach him. I formally request that the divorce decree states Daniel forfeits any rights to my assets or income. This wasn't just a letter. It was notarized and legally binding. It was proof that Daniel willingly gave up any claim to Emily's estate. I headed back to Michael's office, excited with the evidence. When Michael laid eyes on the papers, his face lit up with a grin. "David, this is gold," he exclaimed. "This notarized letter proves Daniel skipped out on his own and agreed to give up future claims. No judge in their right mind would let his lawsuit fly." But Michael also gave me a heads up. Vaughn, Daniel's lawyer, would probably try to tear these documents apart. He'd claim Emily was emotionally unstable during the divorce or argue that circumstances had changed. Vaughn might even say Daniel contributed to Emily's later success. So, to bolster our case, Michael suggested we gather folks who knew Daniel during that time and could testify. We need people to confirm his abandonment and his lack of support for Emily's business dreams. That's when Helen Davis came to mind, Emily's closest friend since college. She stood by Emily during the divorce and knew all about Daniel's disappearing act. I reached out to Helen, and she didn't hesitate to stand with us. "Mr. Miller, I was with Emily the day Daniel left. Her tears were unstoppable. She felt utterly betrayed, not just as a wife, but as a person. Daniel's a coward, and he can't just show up now to claim what he willingly gave up." Helen also shared more dirt about Daniel. During their marriage, he never showed any interest in Emily's business ideas. He'd always put them down, calling them nothing more than childish fantasies. Pretty soon, we found ourselves holding the key to our case, Emily's recordings of her conversations with Daniel. These recordings changed the game. Instead of merely defending ourselves legally, we now had powerful evidence showing Daniel for who he truly was, a manipulative opportunist. Emily's foresight in recording those conversations gave us the upper hand we desperately needed. Michael and I decided to bring these recordings to court. We were sure that they would unmask Daniel's true intentions and undermine his claim to Emily's hard-earned estate. However, before going full steam ahead, I was cautious about one thing: safeguarding Emily's dignity. Sharing her personal struggles wasn't something I took lightly, even if it was key to protecting her legacy. The day after, Michael put together this motion that included all our fresh evidence and pushed the court to take a good look at how Daniel had been trying to intimidate Emily before. This change was going to flip the script in our favor for sure. As the hearing crept closer, my thoughts drifted to the legacy Emily left. She was such a fighter, determined to hold on to what was hers through sheer force of will. Now, it was my turn to keep that fight alive. When we got to the hearing, you could see Daniel wasn't ready for what was coming. As soon as those recordings played, his confidence took a nosedive. Emily's voice rang through the place, and it was like each word reminded everyone just how twisted Daniel's plans were. After considering all the evidence, the judge put an end to Daniel's claims and stopped him from chasing any other legal actions against Emily's estate. Relief washed over us. It felt like Emily had once again stood up for herself, safeguarding her life's work even from the beyond. Winning felt like a double-edged sword. I wanted to cheer for Emily's incredible strength and sharp mind, though I missed her dearly. As I walked out of the courtroom, a sense of calm washed over me, knowing I had done right by Emily's memory and protected her legacy from those who'd abuse it. She had faced everything with grace and dignity, and now she could rest without her past coming back to haunt her accomplishments. A couple of weeks slid by, giving way to some real eye-openers. On the second tape we uncovered from March 14th, Daniel's true colors were on full display. He was all, "Emily, I've been mulling things over after our last chat. Did some digging into your situation, and it looks like I didn't quite get the full picture on your worth. My friends in finance are saying you might be sitting on a cool $35 million in assets." Emily snapped back, asking, "Daniel, how on earth do you have access to this info? It's way out of line to be snooping through my finances." Daniel wasn't backing off, though. "Let's be real," he continued. "You won't be around forever, and someone's going to end up with that cash. Your dad's getting up there and won't need that sort of dough. I'm still young, only 42, with plenty of life left. We can cut a deal here." "You're seriously proposing this?" Emily shot back, disbelief clear in her voice. But Daniel persisted. "Look, I could make a real mess for your family after you're gone. I've got lawyers who could argue our divorce wasn't handled right and drag it out, freezing assets, giving your family a tough time." Emily, scraping together whatever patience she had, said, "Daniel, you've got some nerve. I changed my will so you get squat. Try any funny business, and my family's got proof of all your nonsense." He chuckled defiantly. "We'll see who wins in the end, Emily." Patricia hit pause on the recording, her expression serious as she glanced my way. "Mr. Miller, not long after this went down, Emily told me to call her lawyer, Michael, to update her will and to make sure these tapes were kept safe in case Daniel pulled anything once she was gone." It was mind-boggling. Even while battling her illness, Emily was making sure every step was taken to guard her and my future from Daniel. Those tapes didn't just reveal his greedy nature, but laid bare his threats and his sneaky eyes on her finances. "So, Patricia, how did Daniel even peek into Emily's financials?" "Funny thing, Mr. Miller," she responded. "Just last Tuesday, a bank worker reached out to let me know Daniel attempted to bribe them for Emily's account info. They were decent enough to refuse, but he bugged them through February and March." Daniel had managed to add yet another serious accusation to his growing list of legal troubles. Bribery was now part of the mix, alongside his failed attempt at hacking into someone else's bank accounts. The new evidence we stumbled upon strengthened our case, and not just for securing Emily's inheritance. Daniel now faced potential criminal charges. I reached out to Michael that evening to disclose the existence of the tapes, and he was completely taken aback. "David, with these recordings, not only are we likely to win, but Daniel might also face criminal charges for his threats, his extortion attempts, and hacking into financial data. This flips the script entirely. We're shifting from playing defense to taking the offense." This was the first moment since Emily's death that I felt justice was tipping in our favor. Even after her passing, my daughter had somehow armed us against a crook trying to exploit our pain. When May 15th, 2024, rolled around, it was the first day of court proceedings at the Chicago Civil Court. Michael and I arrived early with a mountain of files, tapes, and testimonies at the ready. Wearing the same black suit from Emily's funeral, I sensed her presence with me, offering her silent support. At 9:30 a.m., Daniel made his entrance, accompanied by his lawyer, Christopher Vaughn, and 3 individuals I hadn't seen before. He was dressed to impress in a gray suit and carried himself with a facade of misplaced bravado. It was as if he was trying to convince everyone he was the victim here. Judge Maria Delgado, a no-nonsense judge known for her fairness, kicked things off by explaining the procedure. Since Daniel was the one who brought the case, he would present his arguments first. Christopher Vaughn confidently took to the stage, starting his argument with, "Your Honor," he began, "my client, Daniel Peterson, was the devoted husband of Emily Miller during the pivotal years of her career. From 2012 to 2014, he provided the emotional, intellectual, and logistical support crucial to the ideas that eventually led her to wealth. He was definitely stretching the truth there. My client set aside his own professional ambitions to support his wife's vision. He devised the concept for affordable American-style fashion stores and introduced her to key retail connections who later became her partners, Vaughn claimed. Hearing these outright lies riled me up, but Michael had already told me to keep calm while they told their tale. Vaughn called up 3 witnesses. First was Raymond Simmons, who claimed to be a business consultant and said he knew both Daniel and Emily during their marriage. "I worked with Daniel back in 2013, testified Simmons, on the business strategy for Emily's stores. He was the mastermind behind the operations. Emily provided the funds, but it was Daniel who planned it all. Then came Sarah Jones, a former partner in business who supported the narrative that Daniel played a major role in Emily's early professional endeavors. Lastly, Albert Reed claimed he was an investor introduced through Daniel, involved in the initial funding rounds for Emily's stores. After these supposed testimonies, Michael whispered to me, "David, these guys are clearly lying. Their stories are way too rehearsed. We will poke holes in their stories during cross-examination." It was time for Michael to present our case, and he had an excellent plan. Instead of diving into legal jargon immediately, he started by playing the recordings Patricia had saved. "Your Honor, before we state our argument," said Michael to Judge Delgado, "we'd like you to listen to some recordings of the plaintiff in his conversations with the late Emily Miller during the last months of her life." As soon as the recording from February 28th began playing, Daniel's demeanor shifted. His face lost all color, and he murmured anxiously to his lawyer. Emily's voice reverberated through the room. "Daniel, you have no right to what I've created. Remember, you signed away your claims when we divorced." Then came Daniel's telltale response. "I've consulted top-notch attorneys, and they have found some loopholes in the divorce settlement, offering me favorable terms, especially if you don't leave a will clearly excluding me." The courtroom went silent. Judge Delgado was meticulously taking notes, absorbing the threats Daniel had levied toward Emily. During the part of the trial when Daniel blurted out, "Your condition is serious, and with what I know, you're looking at only a few months. Consider it, $5 million now, or a heap of legal trouble for your family after you're gone." The room was filled with faces showing disgust. Michael hit the pause on the audio and turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this clearly shows the plaintiff not only admitting he has no stake in the inheritance, but also using the deceased's terminal state to try and squeeze her for money," he stated. Christopher Vaughn jumped up from his chair to challenge it. "Your Honor, those recordings violate my client's privacy as they were taken without his okay," he claimed. Judge Delgado replied firmly, "Overruled. These recordings were made on the deceased's property, and the plaintiff was fully aware of them being recorded. Carry on, Mr. Clark." Michael then continued with the recording from March 14th, where Daniel was even more blatant about his plans. "I can make quite a legal mess for your—" After Emily passed, the family estate became an issue. Daniel had some lawyers trying to prove that their divorce wasn't properly finalized due to some loopholes. But after the recording concluded, Michael presented a letter Emily had signed in front of a notary during their divorce proceedings. Dated August 2014, this document clearly stated Daniel would have no claim on her assets. "Your Honor," Michael said, "this notarized letter demonstrates Emily's explicit intention to keep the plaintiff from gaining any financial advantage." He wasn't done. Michael brought up Emily's will from January 2024, where she specifically designated her father, David Miller, as her only beneficiary. Things got more intense when Michael called Patricia Johnson to the stand. She boldly recounted how Daniel had attempted to dig up financial and legal dirt on Emily, trying to buy her off. The plaintiff tried multiple times to bribe me for confidential details on Emily Miller's finances, Patricia disclosed. She also exposed Daniel's attempts to bribe bank employees for illegal access to Emily's accounts while she battled cancer. Michael skillfully dismantled the testimonies of Daniel's witnesses under cross-examination, proving their stories were false. Directing his focus to Raymond Simmons, Michael queried the lack of specifics in the supposed 2013 business meetings. Simmons floundered, unable to recall addresses, dates, or produce any paperwork. Michael asked, "Can you share with this court any invoice, contract, or document to prove your alleged dealings with Mr. Peterson in 2013? Simmons mumbled a weak excuse about losing documents during a move. Michael gave a knowing smirk. How fortunate. Following that, he scrutinized Sarah Jones about an alleged business venture with Emily. The further he interrogated, the more obvious it became that she knew nothing about the fashion retail industry. When the session concluded after a grueling 4+ hours, Judge Delgado announced she would need 15 days to review all the evidence before making a ruling. As we exited the courtroom, Daniel approached me, visibly rattled. "This is not over, David. I have the means to keep appealing if the verdict isn't in my favor," he said defiantly. I answered calmly, "Based on what happened in there today, you might want to be more concerned about potential criminal charges than concentrating on the inheritance." His angry expression shifted to worry for the first time, sensing he might have bitten off more than he could chew. Man, those 15 days following the hearing felt like they creeped by at a snail's pace. Michael had warned me that even if you've got a rock-solid case, predicting legal outcomes can be tricky, especially when big bucks are involved. During that period, I dug deeper into the so-called witnesses Daniel brought in. My nephew Charles works in IT at a private investigation firm and ended up being super helpful. During a family dinner, he spilled the beans. "Uncle David, you won't believe what I've uncovered about these folks." Turns out, Raymond Simmons had been slapped with a fine for fibbing in a real estate scam back in 2019. And Sarah Jones, the supposed business partner, was actually just an amateur actress paid for fake testimonies before. Charles mentioned she even got $3,000 to lie in a divorce case last year. As for Albert Reed, well, Charles dug up that he wasn't an investor at all, but rather a used car salesman who got canned for fraud. Seeing that Daniel had rounded up a sketchy crew to support his lies, I rang Michael straight away. "We've got to get this in front of the court before they make a decision," I pressed. "David, this info is pure gold," Michael replied. "Let's file for a supplementary hearing and present the evidence of perjury. If we can prove Daniel set up these false witnesses, he won't just lose the case, he'll face criminal charges too." Everything was heading toward May 28th, just a couple of days before the verdict was due. So, here's the scoop. Judge Delgado agreed to take a look at our new evidence, and man, the tension in that courtroom was intense. Daniel and Vaughn showed up looking totally on edge, especially after getting wind of the dirt we were about to dish. Michael led with Simmons's shady history. "Your Honor," he kicked off, "the plaintiff's main witness here has a track record." It turns out Simmons had been fined $5,000 in 2019 for lying in a real estate fraud case. When Michael moved on to Sarah Jones, Judge Delgado's reaction was priceless, pure disgust. This woman had been taking cash for spinning lies in different cases, and Michael clinched it with some invoices showing she moonlighted as a testimonial actress, raking in a couple grand per gig. The real bombshell dropped when Michael lifted the lid on Albert Reed, who wasn't the big investor he claimed to be. More like a fired car salesman caught trying to scam with dodgy papers. But what really sealed the deal were the bank statements Michael laid out, showing money trails from Daniel to Simmons, Jones, and Reed just ahead of their testimonies. We're talking $8,000 to Simmons, $6,000 to Jones, and $5,000 to Reed, right before they hit the witness stand. The courtroom fell dead silent. You could cut the tension with a knife. Judge Delgado locked eyes with Daniel, her face full of anger. "Mr. Peterson," she said, fixing him with a stern look, "how do you explain these payments to these individuals who just happened to testify for you?" Daniel stood up, visibly shaking, clearly not prepared for this. He muttered something about personal loans, but the judge wasn't buying it. "Loans? The exact amounts to these three people who magically support your case?" Vaughn tried to jump in, playing the clueless card, but Judge Delgado wasn't having any of it. "Enough," she declared firmly. "This court will not tolerate this bought testimony nonsense. Mr. Peterson not only brought false witnesses to the stand, but orchestrated this entire sham." And then she did something that left me speechless. She ordered the immediate arrest of the three so-called witnesses and set Daniel up for his own criminal hearing for his attempted deception. Regarding the main case, the judge continued, "In light of the evidence submitted by the defense, Mr. David Miller, this court finds Mr. Daniel Peterson's claims entirely unfounded." She laid it out clear as day. Firstly, recordings revealed the plaintiff admitting he had zero entitlement to Emily Miller's inheritance. Secondly, the will was airtight and didn't favor the plaintiff in any way. And lastly, a notarized letter from way back in 2014 had the plaintiff renouncing any future claims. The judge didn't hold back, saying, "This court finds that the plaintiff attempted to extort the deceased during her vulnerable moments." Oof, that ruling hit hard. Daniel's claims were completely dismissed, and David Miller was confirmed as the sole legitimate heir to Emily Miller's estate. Not only that, but Daniel got stuck with all the court costs and a hefty $50,000 fine for trying to deceive the court. But Judge Delgado wasn't finished. She ordered a criminal investigation into Daniel's shady behavior. Threats, extortion, witness tampering, you name it. And he was forbidden from leaving town until everything got sorted out. When it was all said and done, Daniel just sat there, looking like someone had pulled the plug on his energy. As for Vaughn, he appeared as if he wanted to vanish into thin air. Outside, reporters mobbed us, eager for a reaction. Michael, unfazed, just said, "Justice has been served. Mr. David Miller has defended his daughter's legacy against fraud. Those trying to snag what rightfully belonged to us were stopped dead in their tracks. Emily Miller's legacy remained intact, and her wishes clearly outlined in her will were respected entirely." Later that day, as I sat quietly at home, I found myself flipping through Emily's will again for what felt like the umpteenth time. Towards the end, she had written, "Dad, I pray you never have to use this paper against those with ill intentions. But if you ever do, remember that everything I created was for your future, to honor Mom's memory. Don't let anyone tarnish what our family stands for." For the first time since we lost her, I felt Emily's fight was finally over, and her legacy, built with love, effort, and sacrifice, was safe from those who saw only dollar signs. After the verdict, unexpected revelations came like a tidal wave. People, who had been too afraid to speak earlier, started reaching out with more dirt on Daniel's shady dealings. The first to spill the beans was Rose Fernandez, Daniel's girlfriend from 2018 to 2020. She contacted me on June 2nd, just a few days after the news hit the press. Her voice was shaking as she said, "Mr. Miller, I've followed the case in the news, and there's more you need to know about Daniel Peterson. He put me through the same hell as your daughter." We arranged to meet at a cafe in downtown Chicago. When we sat down, Rose unfolded a chilling story. She described how Daniel swept into her life in 2018, shortly after she inherited money from her late father. At first, he seemed perfect, attentive, caring, and genuinely interested in her well-being. But he'd actually been researching her financial situation long before they met. Rose revealed how he manipulated her, using the same tricks he tried with Emily. Over 2 years, He kept pushing her for loans for supposed investment projects. When they broke up in 2020, Rose discovered he'd secretly skimmed $35,000 from her bank account, exploiting all the trust she'd built over the years. I asked if she'd contacted the police, and she said she tried. But Daniel had threatened to ruin her career if she did. She was a marketing director at a major company, and Daniel had connections that could make things difficult. In the end, she decided it was a price she'd pay to be free of him. Well, it turns out Rose wasn't the only one who fell victim. A bit later that same week, a 58-year-old retired businessman named Anthony Serrano dropped by. Anthony had crossed paths with Daniel at a poker club back in 2021. "Listen, Mr. Miller," he began, "that man's nothing but a financial predator." He claimed to be this big-deal investment consultant and conned Anthony into sinking $80,000 into a phony investment scheme. Anthony even showed me paperwork that left no room for doubt. Daniel had set up a sham company called Peterson Investments and Associates, just to fleece older folks who had hefty savings. When Anthony wanted to pull his money out 6 months on, he found there was no real company, just Daniel using his cash to settle gambling debts. I had to ask, "Did Daniel threaten you too to keep you from going to the cops?" Sure enough, Anthony nodded. Daniel had bragged about having friends in the police who'd make Anthony's life hell. Then he blackmailed him with some embarrassing photos from a business meeting where Anthony might have had one too many. These stories pushed me to dig deeper into Daniel's list of victims. I got in touch with Luis Martinez, a private investigator recommended by Michael, whose expertise was in sniffing out financial fraud. Luis discovered that Daniel had a whole routine he'd been perfecting for 10 years. "Miller," he told me, "this guy's got a set playbook." He targeted people going through tough times, a fresh divorce, a recent inheritance, struggling business folks, or older individuals with savings. Daniel acted like he cared, whether it was a romantic interest or a business relationship, to earn their trust and pilfer their funds. From 2014 to 2024, Luis found at least 12 victims who collectively lost over $400,000. Each case unraveled almost like a cliché, a cheesy script. First, he'd win them over, then get them twisted around, rob them blind, and finally, throw down threats to keep them silent. Luis mentioned the creepiest part. Daniel had a whole dossier on each victim. We're talking personal info, sneaky recordings, embarrassing photos, all used as leverage if they wanted to reclaim their stolen money. Armed with this knowledge, Michael and I realized it was high time to team up with the district attorney's economic crimes unit to hammer together a case against Daniel. The guy they set us up with, prosecutor Robert Navarro, seemed pretty intrigued by the stack of evidence we'd piled up. "What you've got here isn't just an everyday inheritance scam," Navarro told us. "We're dealing with a well-thought-out criminal scheme that's been in action for a decade. With these testimonies and documents, we could charge Daniel Peterson with ongoing fraud, blackmail, threats, and even racketeering." The biggest shock came when Patricia got back to me with something she uncovered in Emily's records. "Mr. Miller," she said, "I found something off in Emily's call logs from last year." Turns out Daniel wasn't just bugging Emily over the phone. In late 2023, he was ringing up her store's customers and suppliers, fishing for financial info about the business. Patricia had a list of over 20 business contacts Daniel had grilled, pretending he was some family advisor Emily hired to audit the business. "Did Emily know about this?" I asked. "Yes, Mr. Miller," Patricia confirmed. Emily had tightened business security and installed recording devices because she suspected something was up. She thought Daniel was up to something, but nobody imagined he'd go this far. This new tidbit made clear that Daniel had already set things in motion to swipe the inheritance months before Emily even passed. He wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment con man. He was a calculating predator, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. By June 10th, Prosecutor Navarro informed me that they'd slapped Daniel with 10 criminal charges. Mr. Miller, thanks to your tenacity and the vital evidence you provided, we're pressing full charges against this guy. The other victims you rallied are ready to testify too, which means Daniel could be facing decades in prison if found guilty. While I was knee-deep in a pile of paperwork one night, I came face to face with the full scope of Daniel's underhanded schemes. He wasn't just your run-of-the-mill bitter ex eager to snatch an inheritance. No, he had a long record as a criminal, thriving by inflicting pain on others. And here's the kicker. Emily unknowingly held the key to exposing Daniel's entire criminal operation. By systematically documenting his threats and keeping all the evidence, she didn't just protect our family's assets, but also helped dismantle a crime wave that had plagued innocent people for years. Fast forward to June 18, 2014. Just when we thought we'd finally caught Daniel in our net and he was going to face the music, I received a phone call that sent everything spiraling. It was from Hope Miller, who introduced herself as Emily's second cousin from Philadelphia. David, I've been following the news on Daniel, and there's something critical you need to know about Emily's passing, she told me, her voice thick with emotion. Her words sent chills racing down my spine. What do you mean by something critical? I probed. I'd rather explain it in person. Can you make it to Philly this weekend? It's about Emily's last days in the hospital. Driving to Philadelphia felt like torture, with my thoughts racing around a maze of worst-case scenarios about what Hope might tell me. She was a nurse at Mercy Hospital in Philly and didn't oversee Emily directly, but had connections within the Chicago hospital network. We met at her place on a Saturday morning. Hope greeted me with a serious demeanor, holding a stack of medical files. David, a friend of mine in oncology. Hope had called me not too long ago, after she heard the news about Daniel from someone at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago, where Emily had been. She'd been sitting on a troubling piece of information since Emily's passing, but hadn't mustered the courage to come forward until now. Hope showed me the hospital visitor logs, which her contact had secretly copied. According to these logs, Daniel managed to visit Emily at the hospital on 3 separate occasions in March, always when I wasn't present. The specific dates were March 5th, 12th, and 19th. I immediately shot back, "That's impossible." Emily had been adamant. No Daniel allowed. Besides, I was practically living at the hospital during her last days. Exactly, Hope replied, which is what makes these visits so suspicious. Somehow, Daniel had portrayed himself as Emily's legitimate husband and faked the documents that got him permission for late-night visits. Hope then unfolded more of the story that her colleague had observed. On his visit on March 19th, just 3 days before Emily's death, Daniel stayed in her room for over 2 hours. The nurse on duty grew concerned when Emily was visibly distressed afterward, and her health markers took a dramatic downturn. I struggled to finish my thought as the realization hit me. Are you suggesting Daniel might have... I'm not saying definitively, David, Hope answered back. But my colleague shared that Emily pleaded with her that night to stop Daniel's future visits. She was incredibly scared and talked about not letting him force her into signing anything. That part hit me hard. Was Daniel attempting to coerce Emily into altering her will while I was out of the picture? Was he exploiting her weakened state? Hope handed me a copy of the nursing notes from that intense night. They read, "Patient extremely agitated following family visit. Requests no further visits from husband. Expresses fear about legal documents. Mild sedative administered to calm nerves." Then she dropped another bombshell. "David, there's more. My colleague checked the hospital security footage from that night and saw Daniel leaving Emily's room with a folder he didn't have when he went in." The moment I wrapped my head around this information, I rang up Michael in Philadelphia to break it all down to him. His reaction was immediate alarm. "David, we need to dig deeper into this, fast. If Daniel was trying to manipulate Emily into tweaking those documents while she was sick, it could be a much bigger criminal matter. Get back to Chicago, urgently. By the time Monday rolled around, Michael and I found ourselves in a room with Prosecutor Navarro pouring out these new revelations. The prosecutor didn't waste a second, instructing a full sweep of the hospital's security footage and ordering interviews with every staff member who was around during Daniel's visits to Emily. Just 3 days later, Prosecutor Navarro called us back with bombshell news that surpassed our worst thoughts. Gentlemen, we've reviewed the security tapes and confirmed that Daniel Peterson sneaked in to see Emily Miller using bogus documents, he revealed. Continuing, he said, even more incriminating, we discovered a copy of Emily's original will among Daniel's stuff, along with some handwritten changes attempting to slyly insert him as a 40% beneficiary. These so-called amendments were dated March 19th, right on the day of his last hospital visit. A mix of shock and fury rose up in me as I asked, "Are you saying Daniel actually tried to tamper with Emily's will?" "Exactly," Navarro confirmed. "We've got solid evidence that Daniel brought fake documents into Emily's room and tried to pressure her into signing these altered will amendments. A nurse reported that Emily outright refused and even threatened to report him, which might explain her upset that night," Navarro elaborated. Michael chimed in, "Prosecutor Navarro, this sounds like he's guilty of pressuring a vulnerable person, document forgery, and perhaps even attempted murder if the stress worsened Emily's health." "You've got it, Mr. Clark. We've thrown these charges into the mix of what Daniel Peterson is already facing. He could be looking at up to 25 years in prison." But what really floored us was when Navarro pulled out the contents of that folder Daniel had swiped from the hospital. Apart from the bogus will, Daniel had whipped up power of attorney documents that would have granted him total control over Emily's assets if she ended up in a coma. "What does that mean in layman's terms?" I inquired. "It means Daniel literally planned for every worst-case scenario, aiming to seize everything Emily had worked so hard for. Had he not been struck down instantly, he intended to have her declared mentally unfit to take charge of her entire fortune as her so-called guardian husband. It was a diabolical strategy aimed squarely at claiming that $29 million, whether Emily was alive or out of the picture. Finding this out hit me like a ton of bricks. I had initially thought Daniel was no more than a greedy chancer surfacing after Emily's death to snag some quick cash. This unveiled a far darker reality. He was a predator poised to prey on my daughter in her final moments, scheming to take everything she'd achieved. "And one last thing, Mr. Miller," Navarro added. "We've discovered Daniel had been snooping around Emily's medical records through some shady contacts in the hospital. He knew precisely when she was at her weakest and planned his visits accordingly." As Michael and I left Navarro's office that afternoon, he gave me a supportive pat on the back. "David, I know this is rough to hear, but there's a silver lining. Emily fought fiercely for her legacy and yours. Even at the very end, she stood her ground against Daniel." That night at home, I read through Emily's letters again. In one dated March 20th, just 2 days before she passed, a particular line now struck me with fresh weight. "Dad, if anything happens to me, make sure my will stands as is. Don't let anyone alter what we've built." Emily was fully aware of Daniel's intentions, and with everything she had, she ensured our future was safeguarded. Her courage and determination not only protected our family's assets, but also revealed the sinister side of a man who thrived on taking advantage of others' anguishes. Fast forward to July 15th, 2024, almost 4 months after Emily's burial, and we were at the doorstep of Daniel Peterson's criminal trial. The Chicago criminal courthouse was swarming with media folks, Daniel's wronged victims, and curious onlookers who'd kept up with the unfolding saga. Daniel appeared shackled, escorted by 2 officers. He bore no resemblance to the man we saw at Emily's funeral. His airs and dapper clothes were replaced by a drawn-out, beaten-down look, as if defeat had settled in his bones. So, there we were, sitting in court, and the judge, a pro with over 15 years tackling organized crime, was reading out Daniel's 14 criminal charges. It was a list that included fraud, forging documents, threats, coercion, blackmail, messing with witnesses, professional misconduct, and ignoring court orders. Prosecutor Robert Navarro didn't waste a second, jumping right in to lay out Daniel's shady history over the past decade. Your Honor, Daniel Peterson isn't some occasional troublemaker. He's been consistently targeting people who can't defend themselves for all of his adult life. For a solid 3 hours, the prosecutor shared stories from 12 of Daniel's victims, each one eerily similar. Daniel would charm his way in, manipulate, drain resources, and then use threats to keep himself under wraps. Rose Fernandez was one of them, and she didn't mince words. He swindled $350,000 from me, all by using stuff he picked up from our close relationship. And when I tried to get it back, he threatened to destroy my career and even leak personal photos of me he took without me knowing. Anthony Serrano came up next, explaining how Daniel had set up a fake company called Peterson Investments and Associates to rip him off. He wiped out my $80,000 life savings, money meant for my golden years. When I found out I was duped, he blackmailed me with embarrassing pics to keep me quiet. The real gut punch? That was Mercedes Lopez's testimony. She was the nurse who'd been there for Emily as she was passing away, and she spoke about how Daniel had shown up at the hospital without permission, trying to convince Emily to change her will. He came around a few times, acting like he was her husband with fake papers. On March 19th, Emily had enough. She told me straight up not to let him come back, she recalled. "Keep that man away from me and my signature," she had said, with no hesitation. The big reveal came when the prosecutor played hospital security footage. There was Daniel, leaving Emily's room with papers he definitely didn't have when he first walked in. Then they pulled out the papers he had forged, including a messed-up will and fake power of attorney documents. "Your Honor," the prosecutor pressed on, "this guy wasn't just sniffing around for a piece of an estate. He tormented a dying woman, exploiting her vulnerability in her final days to try and snatch $29 million. Then it was the defense's turn, led by Daniel's new lawyer, who had stepped in after the previous attorney, Christopher Vaughn, ditched the case. The lawyer claimed Daniel was in a mental crisis fueled by a gambling addiction. "Your Honor, my client's battling a severe gambling problem that pushed him into these bad choices. We're not talking about a criminal mastermind. He's a sick man who needs treatment, not a prison." But the defense quickly fell apart when the prosecutor brought out evidence showing just how calculated Daniel's actions were. Police found a folder at his place filled with details on all the people he'd conned, photos, financial details, you name it, along with notes on how he planned to manipulate each victim. "Your Honor," the prosecutor continued, "Daniel wasn't keeping detailed records on people for a decade just for kicks. Someone battling a gambling addiction wouldn't manage to create fake documents or run sham companies. We're dealing with a seasoned con artist who's been perfecting his scheme for years." When it was my turn to speak as Emily's father, emotions ran high. My voice quivered, but I held it together as I addressed everyone. "Your Honor, Daniel Peterson didn't just try to snatch away the inheritance my daughter built with her hard work. He trashed her memory and made her last days miserable, dragging our family into this legal nightmare. Emily died worried this man might undo everything she worked for. For 4 months, she fought cancer with incredible strength and bravery while also dealing with this parasite's threats. He's not just a thief. He thrives on the suffering of others." After hearing everything and reviewing all the evidence over those days, the judge called for a 2-hour break to think it all over. During those nerve-wracking hours, Michael and I sat outside on the benches with others who had been scammed by Daniel. "David," Michael said to me, "whatever the judge decides, we've already won the important part. Daniel can't mess with Emily's legacy anymore, and his whole dirty scheme, it's over." After heading back into the courtroom, the judge's voice cut through the room, sure and steady. "Having reviewed all the evidence, this court declares Daniel Peterson guilty on every charge." It was a devastating blow. The accused receives an 18-year sentence for ongoing fraud, plus 3 more for forging documents, and 2 years each for making threats and tampering with witnesses. It totals 25 years in prison, the judge continued. Additionally, he owes $847,000 in restitution to victims, must pay court costs, and is permanently barred from any financial or wealth management positions. As the judge completed the sentencing, Daniel slumped into his chair. His lawyer tried to offer some comfort, but the realization of his actions weighed heavily on him. As I stepped out of the courthouse, I was surrounded by more of Daniel's victims, who thanked me for speaking up. Mr. Miller Rose shook my hand, exclaiming, "Had you not fought with everything for your daughter's legacy, Daniel would still be out there, tricking and threatening others." Later that evening, while I was having dinner alone at home, I reflected on everything since Emily's passing over the recent 4 months. The battle was over. Daniel was headed for a lengthy prison stay, and Emily's assets remained intact. Most importantly, her reputation was untarnished, and her legacy was preserved. Fast forward 6 months from Daniel's trial ending on January 15th, 2025, I found myself in Emily's old office, surrounded by architects, attorneys, and charity representatives. That day was the beginning of a new chapter for my daughter's legacy, something she had always wanted but didn't get the chance to achieve. After Daniel was sent to prison, I spent a lot of time contemplating what to do with the $29 million Emily left me. Being 68, I realized I didn't need all that money for a comfortable life. Emily would have wanted her wealth to be more impactful than just ensuring my own comfort. In countless letters, Emily expressed her desire to assist women entrepreneurs who faced similar struggles she did during her divorce. One of her last notes read, "Dad, if anything ever happens to me, I want what I've built to help other women who've been left behind to start over." Taking her words to heart, I launched the Emily Miller Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs. The goal was to provide interest-free loans, free legal assistance, and emotional support to women left by their spouses seeking to start their businesses. Emily's trusted colleague, Patricia Johnson, agreed to oversee the foundation. She told me it was an honor to continue Emily's work and noted how Emily always wanted to leverage her success to help other women achieve financial independence. We based the foundation in Emily's previous office, with a $15 million initial fund to ensure its longevity. I kept the remaining $14 million for personal and family needs. On the first anniversary of Emily's passing, we held an inauguration ceremony attended by those dear to Emily. Her college friend, Helen Davis, delivered a moving speech, portraying Emily as a person who turned hardships into strength and chances for growth. Emily didn't just lament when Daniel left her, expecting a child and empty-handed. She turned that adversity into motivation to be self-reliant. This foundation embodies Emily's spirit, transforming her legacy into a symbol of hope for other women. Michael Clark, an instrumental figure in the legal battles, also spoke. He mentioned witnessing many inheritance disputes, but none as remarkable as my fight to uphold Emily's memory. He stated that Emily could now rest in peace, knowing her legacy wasn't just enduring, but inspiring future generations. One of the most touching moments occurred when Rose Fernandez, a former victim of Daniel's who now volunteers with us, read the first plea for help. It came from Maria Carmen Ruiz, a 34-year-old mother of 2, who had been left by her husband after 12 years of marriage. She sought $25,000 to open a bakery and support her family independently. Emily would have loved being right in the middle of this. As the weeks turned into months, the foundation was practically humming with energy. We were flooded with 50 to 100 women each month, reaching out for a helping hand to get their businesses off the ground. Our team of counselors took their jobs seriously, including a few folks who'd once been victims of Daniel and now wanted to make a difference, just like Emily would have done. By March 2025, a letter arrived that hit me square in the heart. It was from Maria Carmen Ruiz, the very first person the foundation had helped. She wanted to share the news that her bakery was thriving, and she'd even hired 3 other people. "Mr. Miller," she wrote, "your support wasn't just about the money. It gave me back my confidence. When my marriage fell apart, I thought my world was ending. It turned out to be a new chapter. I discovered a newfound love for baking bread, each loaf a little reminder of the hope Emily's foundation had brought me." April brought yet another piece of gratifying news. Daniel's last-ditch appeal was denied. The Illinois Supreme Court confirmed his 25-year sentence. What's more, he started to make amends by working in a prison carpentry shop, paying back his victims. David and Michael filled me in on this one day during our regular meetup. Daniel's out of options now. He's staring down 25 years behind bars, and by the time he's released, he'll be 67, with nothing to his name, reputation in tatters. Justice had come full circle. Sure, there's satisfaction in knowing Daniel didn't get away with it, but what really puts my mind at ease is seeing Emily's legacy continue to thrive. By the end of 2025, her foundation had jump-started over 200 women's businesses, indirectly creating around 800 jobs across the country. Patricia keeps me in the loop on how everyone's doing. "Mr. Miller," she told me, "an impressive 87% of the businesses we've aided are doing well. Emily didn't just make a fortune, she's planted seeds for small family fortunes all over." By December 2025, 2 years after Emily left us, I decided to host a Christmas dinner for everyone who had a hand in this remarkable journey. It wasn't merely a holiday meal, it was a gathering to celebrate justice and togetherness, beating greed and fraud. At dinner, I shared a piece of Emily's last note to me. "Dad, if you're reading this, I'm gone now. Just know all I built was for our family's future and to help others like us. Don't let grief slow you down. Use what I've left to honor Mom and me by creating something beautiful." That night, as stories of victory and resilience floated around the table, I looked at Emily's photo on the wall. I knew she'd be proud of what we'd achieved. Her life may have ended, but it sparked countless tales of hope and strength. Daniel Peterson thought he could swipe Emily's legacy with tricks and lies. What he didn't see was that her real legacy wasn't just in the $29 million. It was in her unstoppable spirit, her generosity, and her talent for turning tough times into stepping stones for others. Emily left her mark, not just by protecting her inheritance from his clutches, but by planting seeds of hope for countless women who, just like her, wouldn't let tough times win.